Hi, we're looking here at a question from an Edexcel International A-Level Psychology paper 2 in the biological psychology section, but it could equally well come up in an A-Level, UK A-Level psychology paper for Edexcel. Exactly the same questions could be asked because it's really just assessing the same research methods content that's in both courses. We're going to look at all parts of the question. The examiner report shows us how to get full marks. I'll just show you the question first, and you can pause the video if you want to have a go at any of these 4 parts before I quickly go through the full marks examples. So Harold conducted an investigation to see if the number of hours spent playing online games affected aggression. He asked his participants to spend no more than 1 hour a day playing online games for the first week of his investigation. In the second week, the participants could spend up to 7 hours a day playing online games. Harold asked his participants to record how many aggressive thoughts they had each day. He then calculated the total number of aggressive thoughts for each participant in each week. So the first question is asking us to identify the independent and dependent variables in this study for 1 mark each. Part B is explain one reason why he conducted a Wilcoxon Signed Ranks test on his data. Then we have to actually carry out the Wilcoxon test and calculate a value for t. And then finally, there's another 2-marker, explain one improvement he could make to his investigation. Okay, so going back to that first question, identifying the variables. The mark scheme here shows us that they're both AO2 marks. And the key thing here is no marks for generic answers. You must identify these variables in the study and be specific about what they are. So here we've got 2 out of 2 answer. The IV, the number of hours spent playing online per participant, and the DV, the number of aggressive thoughts each participant had. So these are sufficiently operationalized variables because they've actually said the number of hours and the number of thoughts. So it's not just a vague statement like aggression or the gaming. It needs to be specifically what's being measured. Then we move on to question 2b, which is about the Wilcoxon test. So the most frequent answers were that it was a test of difference or a test of repeated measures, with a large minority also being able to identify that it was ordinal data. So you could have used any of those points. But the key thing here about the mark scheme, if we look at the mark scheme for part B, is that there's an AO2 mark and an AO3 mark. The AO2 mark is for the reason, and the AO3 is for the justification, which is for explaining why it's true in the case of this study. So if we come back to the example answer we've been given, why was it the Wilcoxon test? It was used to test to see if there was a difference in the amount of times participants had aggressive thoughts, because he used repeated measures design to have his participants spend the 1 hour and also spend the 7 hours playing video games for results. So that could be a bit clearer, and it's also talked about being a test of difference and being a test of being a repeated measures design, but the examiner has picked out that here the repeated measures gains a mark, and for explaining why it's repeated measures in this study, the same participants, they spend up to 1 hour and then up to 7 hours in the second week, so they're being tested twice, and that is fully justified for the second mark. Then we've got the working out of the Wilcoxon test here. There's a little useful comment here first to look at, which is that the most frequent error came in ranking of the differences, with some answers not ignoring the minus signs. Now the minus signs in the differences, you do need to pay attention to them for the final step where you add together the ranks to find t. The point here is that you ignore the minus signs when you're ranking the size of the differences. So the smallest differences, we ignore the ones that stay the same, participant D, participant F. Then we've got 2 differences of -1. So they have a rank of 1.5 because they're the first and second joint. And so they get the average rank of first and second, which is 1.5. Then we're on to the third one, which is the difference of 2. Doesn't matter that it's positive now, doesn't matter that the next one is -4, that's the 4th biggest difference, and finally 5 is the 5th biggest difference. It doesn't matter actually which So we rank these from smallest to largest in terms of the size of the differences, and then we add together the positive ranks and the negative ranks, and we find a value of 7, which gets us all of the marks. T equals 7, 4 out of 4. So just one final part of this question to look at, which was the improvements, various improvements that you could suggest here that would get you both marks. But again, this is a question with an AO2 mark and an AO3 mark for justifying why the difference would improve the study. One other thing that's important to just point out here, I'll come back to the examiner report for this, is that some answers changed the research method or suggested an improvement that would change the aims of the study, which were not credit-worthy. Why? Because that would actually be a different study. And the question is, how would you improve this study? So it can't actually change it completely. So Harold could have had a control group. This should be control group really rather than controlled group, but it's close enough, of people that didn't spend any time playing video games so that they can compare the results of the control group with the people who played video games. This will allow him to see if there is any difference and will make the study more reliable. So good idea. It would improve the study, it would make it more reliable, and that's been sufficiently explained for 2 marks.